Welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts with hosts Margaret Pickoff, Tom Butzler, Sandy Feather, and Tim Abbey.
Hello, and welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast from Penn State Extension for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts. I'm one of your hosts, Margaret Pickoff. I'm a horticulture educator with Penn State Extension, and on each episode, I'm joined by my colleagues on the green industry team as co-hosts. On today's special episode, I'm happy to welcome Tom Butzler, Sandy Feather, and Tim Abbey for a discussion on what we're seeing around the state as of today, which is the 25th of April, and also what we think might be in store for the season based on what we know from last year and previous seasons. So we're also celebrating that we have 4,000 downloads of our podcast. And so that's one reason we're excited to have a special episode today. So welcome everybody, Tom, Sandy, and Tim. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, Margaret. Hey, great to be here.
It's rare that we all get together for a podcast recording, so this will be fun. And maybe a good way to start out is just by reminding our listeners where each of us is located in Pennsylvania, because we're all seeing slightly different things this spring based on where we are. There's a lot of overlap, but I am based in Bucks County and kind of the greater Philadelphia area.
And I'm based in southwestern Pennsylvania. My office is in Allegheny County, but I do cover the whole southwest quarter of the state.
Well, thanks, Sandy. And Tim?
I'm based in York County and then cover counties around the Harrisburg area.
Great. And Tom?
Yeah, I'm almost located right in the center of the state. The county office is in Clinton County.
Great. Yeah, so I can kind of start out with, usually at the beginning of our episodes, we chat about what we're seeing, but that's going to be the whole episode today. So we're just going to launch right in. And something that's been on my mind lately are invasive plants. Last week at Peace Valley Nature Center in Doylestown, I gave a class for Master Gardener volunteers, Master Watershed Steward volunteers, and the trail volunteers at the Nature Center about invasive plants. And it was kind of it was an identification class, but the way it was set up, it was kind of like a train the trainer type thing. And so I was teaching them how to teach about invasive plants. And so we did a couple fun activities, and in the end, kind of came together as a group to lead one another in an invasive plant walk based on what we saw at the center. So it was really fun. It was cold and wet, but everyone stayed pretty upbeat, which is great. And it's a great time to be looking out for invasive plants because they often leaf out earlier than our native plants. And so they're kind of usually the first things to turn bright green in the woods in the spring, and so you can identify them pretty easily. And if you're unsure of the identification, you can kind of wait until later in the season to see what that leaf shape looks like, what the flowers look like, what the fruit looks like. But yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about invasive plants, and we we get some questions from the industry about noxious weeds. So related, those are the plants that are invasive that have been deemed to cause some sort of harm to the state of Pennsylvania. And so they're regulated by the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. And we've got, unfortunately, this big long list of noxious weeds, and there's more added all the time. But there's been a couple questions lately about barberry, which is on the noxious weed list, Japanese barberry. And so I thought it might be a good opportunity to kind of review a little about barberry, and if you guys want to add anything too, just because it gets talked about quite a lot. But So Japanese barberry was added to the noxious weed list in fall of 2021. And what that means is then there's a 2-year moratorium. And after that point, you're not allowed to cultivate it, propagate, sell, transport the plant in Pennsylvania anymore. And so the total stop sale and destruction order went into effect in fall of 2023. So at this point, there shouldn't be any nurseries that are selling Japanese barberry, but there are a couple of exceptions. And if you've listened to the podcast for a while, we did have Mark Brand on from University of Connecticut, and he's a plant breeder who has worked on some of these cultivars of Japanese barberry that are exempt from the noxious weed list here in Pennsylvania. So right now there's only 4 cultivars. They were all bred at UConn and I think developed down in North Carolina for sale, but maybe there will be more added to the list. They are just plants that the breeders have been able to prove are not going to become invasive. So they're sterile or just not able to spread in the same way as the straight species. So yeah, there's a lot of information on the PDA website, but that's a good one to be thinking about at this time of year. If you find a barberry, don't buy it. Certainly don't plant it. Because
But there's a reason that barberries are utilized in the landscape. They are hardy. They're a tough plant. You got tough sites, whether they're poor soil conditions or sunny conditions. So, that, and you can shape and shear them if you'd like into whatever shape you'd like, I guess.
Yeah.
The deer don't eat them.
The deer don't eat them. Some people use them as hedges because of the spines on them. But yeah, a lot of great attributes. But as you were talking about, Margaret, there, the biggest one is its fruiting characteristics. Can look nice in the winter in that it adds a little bit of winter aesthetics. I mean, particularly I don't like it, but some people might. But then that is open to a food source for birds, and then they just spread them kind of all over. And as you mentioned before, you go out into these kind of wooded settings, and they're leafing out and prodding out anything that's trying to come up underneath them.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, there's, I think, a lot of good native plants that have maybe not the exact same attributes, but certainly nice fall color and nice bright fruits. But I think, based on the names of these cultivars that are exempt, I think they're probably also pretty beautiful for the landscape. We have Crimson Cutie and Mr. Green Jeans, Lemon Cutie. So I think they're probably a nice range of colors. And
Yes.
you can feel safe knowing that you're not contributing to this issue of these invasive barberries starting to encroach on native plant habitat in the woods and natural areas. But I think there are a lot of existing barberry plants in Pennsylvania landscapes that have been there for decades, and
But
and they're still there.
They're still there
because there's no law, I guess, to make people remove them.
Right.
We can suggest that as a good thing to do, but we can't really make anybody remove them. And it looks like some of the other breeders are trying to get in on the Sterile Barberry Act, and if they want their cultivars to be accepted by the Department of Ag here, they're going to have to submit their data as far as their sterility is concerned.
Right.
And
You mentioned the naturalized settings, Margaret, and it's more than that, though. Just a couple of weeks ago, driving down the highways, in kind of urban settings, along the roadways, the ornamental pears were in full bloom. The calorie pear, and that just seems in full bloom and almost looks kind of pretty. I mean, everything is white. You're going through this white tunnel. But every year it just seems to be getting worse and worse along the roadways.
Yeah. And I'm not aware of any exempt cultivars yet of calorie pear, and it could be that people are just done with it, or because it is kind of I think it's been planted in new developments alongside red maple as like the main small, urban suburban tree for so long. But we have so many other great flowering trees, not only natives, but also, trees that maybe aren't native but aren't invasive. And they smell a lot better than the Calvary pear flowers. So I think they're here, they're everywhere here in the city in Philly and definitely along the highways. And they look nice from afar, but unfortunately, yeah, they are also a huge problem.
And they are crowding out the native species.
Right.
And yeah, it's the same story here in the Pittsburgh area, all along the highways and stuff. When you take the parkway out to the greater Pittsburgh airport, it's a sea of white.
Yeah. And that's a plant, and maybe for time's sake we won't go into it, but I know Tom, you've given talks on Calvary pear, and it has a fascinating story behind it about how it got here. That's worth looking into. But the way that we find these plants in different parts of the world with some sort of attribute that we like, and then a small portion of them become really invasive. But that's one that just it really has become an issue. But it's got a very interesting backstory, and maybe we'll delve into that on another episode. But
Interesting backstory, and part of it has to do with plant sex. So we'll leave everyone hanging.
yeah, so everybody
Little word
get
story,
build
huh?
the intrigue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well-
So what about you guys? What are you thinking about? What are you seeing?
Well, before we leave the invasive plant subject, I want to put in a plug for two previous Penn State educators that we had, Dave Jackson and Art Gober,
Mhm.
who developed a really excellent series on invasive plant management. So if you go to the extension or the Penn State website and search by specific plant that you're dealing with, if you know what it is, they have a really nice series. There's a barberry one, there's Japanese stiltgrass, autumn olive, and so forth and so forth. And those go over both chemical and non-chemical management options.
And they have great identification pictures too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pictures
really good
are
pictures.
fantastic too. And I apologize if there's at some point like another co-author might be listening to this podcast, because they may have had somebody else work on individual ones, but it's a really good series.
As a
Yeah.
matter of fact, I led a walk. We have a group here, with the Three Rivers. We have the Friends of the Riverfront, and they have volunteer stewards who go out and try to control some of the invasives. They don't have pesticide licenses, so they're just doing non-chemical controls. But I actually made a packet of those sheets and gave them out when I led a walk for them on April 13th, and they seem to be very well received.
Yeah, that's a great resource, and totally free on the website to print and use. Yeah, we've heard from folks in the industry at our meetings, like right away meetings, and where we're talking a lot about invasive plants, that some folks just keep a stack of them in their truck. And maybe they're just telling us that because we're extension and they're but I like that they are a really good resource for when you're out in the field and trying to make some decisions.
But
When
it's a huge topic, because the four of us, none of our backgrounds are specifically like in invasive plant studies. But Margaret, you were just doing something. Sandy was doing something. I was at a program today and tomorrow where I was talking about invasive plant identification and management. It's just an ongoing threat. And I think particularly if you like to spend time in the woods, you really see firsthand the damage that it does, where I think a lot of maybe the general public still doesn't grasp, well, who cares about invasive plants? Why can't I just go buy barberries now?
Well, I think a lot of the green industry doesn't really get it. I don't know how much time landscape professionals spend in the woods or nurserymen spend in the woods. I know some that I know personally actually do spend a lot of time in the woods, but one of the things we're running into here is we have groups like this Friends of the Riverfront who get that there are some of these invasives you're not going to deal with without using herbicides, and they don't really have pesticide licenses. They're not unwilling to get them, but they've been trying to hire companies to treat certain areas. And we literally, we have landscape contractors who are doing a little bit of this, but they don't really seem to understand that this is not like building a fancy outdoor kitchen in Mrs. Jones's yard. And they're charging these groups way too much to do the control, so they're relying on a company based in State College because they just can't find the people locally to do this job. And I've been in conversation with Vinny Catrone about he did a program trying to get landscape contractors to add this on as kind of a niche service, but they need to understand the pricing, because you can't charge what you charge for those, fancy kitchens and things like that. It's a different skill set and it's a different price point.
That's a really interesting part of the conversation. I hadn't run into that before, but that makes a lot of sense.
Well, you're actually in a part of the state where there's quite a few companies who do invasive removal, and these groups like Friends of the Riverfront can hire them at a reasonable rate to get the work done. So it's it's an interesting problem, and I have struggled with how to bring this idea like, hey, maybe this is, you care about these native places, maybe you should start a company.
Yeah, it's funny that all this is coming up in our conversation, because today at that program was an arborist from a company based in Harrisburg, and we were talking about invasive plants, and he was saying like they even talk within their own company about adding on that to the business to go out into homeowner woodlots to do invasive plant removal.
Yeah, interesting. We'll have to check in on that. Sandy, what else are you seeing out in the Pittsburgh area? What's been coming up for you?
Well, lots of things are blooming, and it's actually been a delightful spring. I was a little concerned last night because just north of us, they had a hard freeze, and I was hoping that we didn't get the tail end of that. But we've got evergreen azaleas are in full bloom in my area. Partridge wine, calycanthus is blooming. Still some flowering bulbs. My leucojum is blooming. Tulips, where people don't have too many deer, are blooming very nicely. Some of the negative things I'm seeing, aphids on viburnums, particularly Viburnum carlesii and Viburnum lentago. The leaves are all deformed by these aphids. Doesn't seem to really spoil the bloom, though. The carlesii still smell really good. Boxwood psyllids are active now. They're the ones that make the cup leaves on the terminal growth. I don't know that I think of them as a horrible issue for boxwood. They're not going to kill your boxwood. They don't do the same kind of damage that leaf miners do, but they're busy. And unfortunately, mulch volcanoes are in full bloom in Western Pennsylvania. I saw quite a bit of it in my travels today, and I was like, okay. I don't know. We try really hard to get people to mulch correctly. I haven't cracked that nut how to get them to stop doing the volcano mulching.
I know this will be a hard question to answer, but do you think most of those that you saw were homeowners were doing that, or that they'd hired somebody to do it?
These were commercial landscapes, so I'm assuming these were landscape contractors.
And yeah, I guess the second question would be, are they being asked to do that, or is this something that the landscape company is doing on their own? Are the homeowners asking for that look?
Well, again, these are all commercial properties that I'm
commercial
seeing,
properties. You did say
I'm
that.
seeing this on, but
or their clients, maybe their clients asking for it. I don't know.
Exactly. Because they see this elsewhere.
Yeah.
And maybe, the client, whether it's a commercial property or a homeowner, sees that somewhere else. Maybe they like the look of it, or they think that's how mulching is supposed to be done.
Yeah. Hard to imagine that someone would see that and be like, that looks really great. But maybe we're just programmed to see it as, you know,
I think they,
that's
no,
the
Yeah.
recipe for some bad
they
stuff
like
to
to see
happen.
just
Yeah,
fresh
when you
mulch.
see that when you see that tree going into the ground looking like a telephone pole, you're like, it's either planted too deep or mulched too deep, or maybe both.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I think I don't know. Someone's got to get to the bottom of who's encouraging that, but I have a feeling that yeah, it might be like a stylistic thing or just because I also see it not usually on homeowner properties, but commercial and also like developments, housing
Mhm.
developments that have some sort of common area and the trees, you know, along the entrance or along the roadside, I'll have that done to them.
So I know Tim is a big TikTok social media user, so he'll hop right on this and figure out if there's something on
Well,
that.
that's going to get banned, so I'm going to have to change platforms.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Tim will be right on it. Whatever social media it's popping on, he's a heavy
Yeah.
user.
I
So
think you and I, Tom, are about in the same boat. I think it's like we have no, like, if we were going to become like up for some job position or run for political office, they could search for my online content. They're going to find zero.
Wow, mystery.
yeah.
The mystery men.
Yeah. Well, I
I do.
assume that all the kids are talking about mulch volcanoes on TikTok. It's probably
Sure.
a very very hot topic.
I do have a theory as to where they come from.
Oh
So
yeah.
you've got a line of trees like on a commercial property, and you've got a wheelbarrow full of mulch, and you go to the first tree, you dump some, second tree dump some, third tree dump some, and if that tree is lucky, you at least smooth it out so it's an even volcano mulch instead of piled up on one side of the tree.
Mm.
Yeah, I think
Very
we just
well.
like the fresh looking color too. So these,
Oh, I think you're
commercial
absolutely
offices,
right.
they're just like, oh, well, it's spring. We need to have, like that dark color mulch thrown
Right.
down.
Yep, we got to have fresh mulch.
Hmm.
Anyhow, so that's what
Interesting.
I'm seeing in Western Pennsylvania right this minute.
Yeah. Thanks for that report from out west.
Out in the
Yeah.
hinterlands.
How about you, Tom?
Yeah, so I mean, not too much different than what Sandy's talking about. I mean, we're a little probably delayed, but so jumping from the plants she was talking about, I just want to jump on a couple insects. And so the eastern tent caterpillar came out a couple weeks ago. So for anyone that's wandering around, you'll see the tents in the crotch angles of the trees. They're just they're not very big right now, and so they'll be expanding over the next couple weeks, getting a little larger. So, and not doing any damage, unsightly. If anyone's really concerned about it, just get a stick and just kind of twiddle it around, break up that nest, and problem solved. I wouldn't use any type of insecticide. But we're just about at that point here, at least in central Pennsylvania, where the spongy moth, which is the new name for the gypsy moth, should be emerging from their eggs. I think we're reaching the appropriate growing degree days, and I think another day or two of warm weather will probably reach it. And it's been a problem for the past couple of years now. And boy, if we can just have a wet spring, I think it will knock it down pretty drastically. But you pull up the DCNR webpage, and it shows you where they're spraying, and it gives you an indication where the infestation is occurring. It's basically up to the New York border, right around Potter County and Bradford County, and just come all the way down through the state, all the way down to the Maryland border, almost like a straight line, those two county widths all the way down. And they're spraying about, the state is about a little over 200,000 acres of state-owned land. And again, as I mentioned in a podcast, I think was last year, that tells you nothing about how much is being sprayed on privately owned land. So that gives you an indication that it is still a problem. And a one-time defoliation of most of our trees is not a big deal, but when you have multiple defoliations, you're going to see some tree mortality, and that's the big concern. So yeah, it's going to be a problem again, I guess, this year.
It's interesting, Tom, like where you are and where it's still heavy. I grew up and my mom still lives in McKean County, which is just a little west outside of that. And a few years ago, it was bad there, but then, a combination of some wet springs at the right time had that bacteria, that fungal and viral pathogen active. And that, so the population has pretty much crashed over there.
Yeah. It's never totally eliminated. The spongy moth is always around, but it kind of just flares up every several years. And you mentioned McKean County, that is outside of this swath coming down central Pennsylvania, as you mentioned. But, Lycoming, Clinton, Center, Mifflin County. I mean, there's a lot of acreage that's being sprayed on state-owned land. I can't imagine, some of these hunting cabins, people that own large amount of acreage are going to just sit by and watch some of their investments go by the wayside. I bet that there's going to be a lot of fixed wing and other aerial applications going on. It's kind of interesting that when you look up or pull up the list of applicators, that you're starting to see some drone applicators pop up into these lists. So that's kind of interesting how the technology is kind of changing.
Yeah, and this is this is now is this the third season that we're expecting them to be active since so that's is that a longer than usual period of high population?
It's still within the realm of possibilities, but typically they don't last that long. Actually, I think it's more like the fourth season. It should have crashed this year.
Yeah.
And last year, the spring, this year, maybe we'll get to it. It's been rainy, but last year was not. The spring was dry for most of the state. And so that population just kept on just chugging along. So yeah, typically, when you read the research, they'll say that you have the wet spring, but also when you have these high populations, the moths, or I guess it's more the caterpillars, get stressed out. I mean, they start running out of food. There's other things going on, and that helps to contribute to this population decline. It just reaches a threshold where it can't sustain itself. But everything just seems to be perfect for this insect to just keep chugging along.
Wow. Yeah, well, we'll have to check in with you a little later in the season to see how it's all panning out up there. How about you, Tim? You're down in York County.
Nothing exciting for the most part, though, and we were talking about this before we came on. It's like a 180-degree turn this spring compared to last year through, I think, most of the state, where last year was kind of a record-setting dry period, particularly for spring season, whereas this year for the Harrisburg area, and I'll extrapolate out, which is never a good thing, but probably for all of us, is probably like record-setting April precipitation. So there's none of the issues that, like last year, turf was turning brown like in May and June, and that's not going to be the case here. But I haven't, other than some of the things like Sandy and Tom have mentioned, I haven't seen anything that's caught my eye, like where a pest is becoming an issue. And I haven't had any clients contact me to come out and look at anything sort of unusual. The one thing was kind of interesting that happened to me this week, that I'm going to take it out of the setting where it was and kind of blow it out into like, landscape and tree care work. Is I was contacted by a high school teacher at a high school near me last Friday, who said that they had whiteflies in their greenhouse and did not want to use any insecticides and wanted to use a biocontrol organism. So I gave her the contact information for a lab where she could get that material. And then she asked me to come out and speak to the class about careers in biology and extension and things like that, and then also get a chance to go into their greenhouse because I wanted to see what they were doing. And so went in, and they showed me they were growing some lettuce and stuff in some hydroponic settings, and they couldn't identify one of the insects that were on there. It was aphids. I didn't have a hand lens with me, so I don't know what species it was. But then they were like, oh, they wanted to show me the whiteflies, and so they took me to the hanging baskets, and what she had misidentified as whiteflies were just like the shed exoskeletons from nymphal aphids as they were molting to become adults. And without kind of knowing what they are, if you don't have a background in that, they kind of look like whiteflies. Now, I think the thing to me I would have thought might have tipped them off is like, they didn't fly. Like you didn't pick up the plant and shake the plant or brush your hand over and things started fluttering around. Yeah. There was none of that. But she had ordered a parasitic wasp that goes after whiteflies that does not go after aphids. So whether you want to use like biocontrol, which I don't think most landscape companies are doing that, but whether it would be biocontrol or a chemical control, it goes back to kind of the component or the kind of foundation of like integrated pest management is proper identification of your plant that you care about or your client cares about, and then what's the problem, whether that's an insect disease or whatever, or a weed issue. Because if you misidentify it, you're going to potentially pick the wrong thing to try to manage it, and it might not manage it, and then your client's not going to be happy. So it was good, for me, it was a nice little teaching moment for them and for the kids that were in the class. But you run into that. I mean, all four of us, I'm sure, have run into like just working with clients who've misidentified something and like, well, I particularly, like Tom too, because he does not only green industry, but he does a lot more, I think, vegetable work than, the other three of us. People just, oh, I thought it was this. And so I've been spraying, X fungicide and nothing's working. Why isn't it working? It's like, well, it's a bacterial pathogen. So you're not going to get control of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that goes back to the conversation we had earlier. Margaret was talking about the identification characteristics of these invasive weeds that whatever group, I can't remember what it was you were talking to, but the importance of ID in anything, insects, diseases, plants.
Yeah, and I think I think some pesticides have kind of a broader target range, but when you're getting into biocontrols, it seems like you need to be pretty specific about what the target organism is and what you're going to release to try to control it, because they can be pretty specific, I think, on what they feed on and what they're good at controlling.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool that she did that. She wanted to jump on it and wanted to do biocontrol and things like that. And so I'm hoping, I followed up with another email and told her like, well, contact a lab, maybe we're just getting ready to ship your stuff today, and then you could catch them and they can pull that order and they'll substitute for something else if the price is comparable. But I did not get a return email, so I don't know what happened.
Yeah, and when you're using those biocontrols, it's it's the temperature and stuff in a greenhouse range, but it's also the life stage of the pest. Some are going to go after the egg stage, some maybe go after the pupa, and so there's a lot of coordination required to pull off that biocontrol.
Yeah, and it's something like you pick the wrong thing and something like that's not right. The temperature conditions aren't right, or the life stage of the pest isn't right, and it doesn't work. And then again, this would be more like, I think, for greenhouse propagation houses, and they're like, oh, biocontrol doesn't work, so I'm not going to try it again. Or it's very effective if you just make sure you match the right parameters and pick the right. It's like putting the right plant in the right growing environment for it to succeed. You just do the same thing with those, beneficial insects or mites.
And I think, at least based on my experience and seeing talks given by some of these biocontrol companies, their customer service, I think, is very, very knowledgeable in what you need to be using to control particular things, and what the application sort of temperature and environment needs to be, and how exactly to do it. And so I think they're a great resource. They're very, very knowledgeable at a lot of those companies.
Yeah, just go back, just comment on Tim's remark about the rainfall. I don't know if in central Pennsylvania we've broken a record yet. I know it's getting kind of close, but I do know that we received a lot of rain. My swimming pool was down over the winter on water, and so I had to fill it back up. So I hooked up the gutter system to the pool, and within about 3 days, I filled it up. I was short about a little over 2,000 gallons. So within 3 days, I filled up 2,000 gallons of water. So yeah, we did receive a lot of rain in central Pennsylvania.
Same here in western Pennsylvania.
But is that going to be detrimental to plant health? Is that something that we're going to see any issues, any mortality, any problems with the excessive rain we've had in the spring?
You would think there'd be a lot more leaf spots pathogens showing up as we go into the rest of the growing season, where people did not treat, because again, you're going to spray everything, and particularly when we had strings of like rainy days together, you couldn't go out and spray. So that would be my guess, is we see a lot more like foliar pathogens.
Well, and I was on a property where there's a lot of Norway spruce trees planted as a screen, and they were fairly well established. They've been there for a while, but I can't really determine if they were initially planted too deeply or if soil has been moved over those root balls, but there are definitely some of those trees on their way out. Now, the one tree that was dying had produced a gazillion cones. It was obviously very stressed, and it's not going to come back no matter what they do to it. But I think the very heavy soil and the excessive rain we had, like the other trees, are starting to kind of go in there. I did recommend, getting somebody in there with an air spade and trying to pull some of that soil back from the trunks of the tree and see if they could expose the root flares a little bit.
I don't think we're going to see. Go ahead.
I just, I think in that situation, I think the excessive rain is kind of hastening the decline of those trees.
I don't think we're going to see. I don't know how much plant death we're going to see. I don't think anything, but I think we're going to see some plant stress. And one of the things I think we might see is an issue with soil compaction. So in lawns, when grass is actively growing, as wet as that soil it is, with people going in with ride-on mowers or heavy equipment, I think you're going to see some of the compression of that soil, and that's going to hurt root growth. And then as a result, you're going to see some manifestation on the above ground growth because of the crushed pore space.
Right, I agree.
It'll be interesting to see if this year's going to set up to be like the summer of 2018, where every county in Pennsylvania and all the eastern seaboard was 20 or more inches above normal precipitation for the year. That was insane. So
Yeah,
next year, you'll see, I think what you're leading to, Tom, is I think you'll see a lot of plants that just died because the soil was just constantly soaked and filled and they couldn't get oxygen.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing you'll see sometimes, we'll have a spring like this where it's really wet and the ground is saturated. And you start to get that root death, and then bam, it gets hot and dry. And it's got a reduced root system to kind of try to deal with that drought. So it'll, we'll see how things go moving forward.
Yeah, I remember a couple years ago, I was contacted by a public garden here in Philly, and they were just having some trees dying with no, there was nothing about it that seemed out of the ordinary. They weren't diseased. They weren't, there was no insect issue. And I remember reaching out to Vinny Catrone, who we've had on the podcast. He's a extension urban forester, and he said one of the big stressors in the last few years was that year that Tim mentioned in 2018, where there was just so much rain, and it's not out of the question that even a couple years before, having all that rain could have affected the tree that many years in the future. And so it might take a while to see the effect of a lot of rain if it continues to be really wet. But as we have seen in the last couple of years, it seems to be kind of oscillating between very wet and very dry. And that's also very, very stressful for plants in the landscape. So
except those invasives.
Yeah, they seem to
they seem well adapted.
Yeah, so you have to give them that at least. Very well adapted. And something I've noticed as I've been out the last couple of weeks is just looking at weeds in farmer fields and landscape beds and things like that. And this is a little related to wet soil, but also just mild winter temperatures. I think a lot of our winter annual weeds, chickweed and hairy bittercress and things like that, they are just maturing much earlier than growers are used to, or landscapers. And so they're going to seed before, and sometimes before they can be controlled. So they're continuing to build up that soil seed bank, and, that will cause issues for years to come. So that's one way that I think our mild winters and wet winters and springs could impact caring for the landscape.
Yeah, definitely. I see we've got great crops of all those winter annuals and more coming along. The garlic mustard is blooming in the woods now. So
yeah.
I want to bring up something that's completely off topic for the focus of our podcast. It's the kind of the listeners who listen in to kind of give them an idea of what a day in the life of an extension educator can be and the questions that you get. I was in my office yesterday talking to our office staff because it was administrative assistant, like professional day. And we started talking about, like, a number of years ago, I think in 1 year, I interacted with 5 people who had delusional parasitosis.
Yeah.
And I told them, I go, it'd been a couple of years. And if some of this, like even during COVID, our office was open in York. I go, I haven't really dealt with anybody since then. But then I got a text from a colleague who was also there from the time I drove from my office home, that somebody actually came in that has that condition, and there's a sample for me to look at when I go back to my office on Monday. So it's what makes the job of an extension educator challenging, yet makes any day particularly very interesting, because you just don't know what kind of question you're getting. and that is not my area of expertise. So, I try to work with them as best I can.
You mean when people bring in human skin and ask you to look at it? That's
scabs and dandruff and skin.
Yeah.
Fibers,
It's interesting that
and
pretty much every extension educator you talk to, even, folks who are just in horticulture or just in a different field, have had clients come in with that condition, which is, thinking that there are insects that are on your body or around your home, when they're we can't find evidence that there are insects there, and that could be a very distressing
it's a real thing.
It's
a real thing.
It is.
The psychosis. So, and it needs to be treated.
And you the best thing you can do is be kind, take them seriously. And I do frequently send samples to Michael Scavarla.
Yes.
And
we do have a way to deal with it.
I mean, most of the time it's dirt and dust and skin cells and whatever, but every now and then he does find like some kind of a parasite, like a bird mite or something like that, where birds or bats maybe have gotten into somebody's house. And so sometimes it is a real thing, and they're not suffering from this delusion. They do have a problem. But I think medical doctors are a bit challenged by this, because I don't know how up they are on insect bites.
And some of the people I've worked with in the past, whatever they bring in, I can show them under, we have a dissecting scope, and they see that, and then that's very comforting to them. They can see that. I go, look, if it was an insect, it would have, if it wasn't broken, you'd probably see 6 legs, or if it was a mite, there'd be 8. There's be a defined head, and they see that it's just, whatever it is, and they're fine. And then I remember working with a woman one time, and she, I can't remember where she said she found this, if it was on her body or whatever, but it was a thrips, which, they're predatory thrips. And then most of them are, plant pests. And so unfortunately, all of that, by showing her what that was and telling her it probably just came into your house on your clothing, if you're outside gardening or something, that just fed the problem.
Oh, no.
It was counteracting. And I go, some insects will bite you, like minute pirate bugs will bite sometimes. They're a predatory insect. I go, I mean, it's possible that, thrips might have, scraped at your skin. I go, but, they're not there to feed on you. So it wasn't that case. It did not happen.
I've gotten some pretty bad bites from I think they're lacewing larvae, because they're so voracious, and they're just like, they'll bite into whatever they land on.
That one's a new one.
It's pretty painful too.
Okay.
And they're small, but they have a pretty good chomp.
Well, and I've had Asian multicolored lady beetle adults bite me.
Oh wow. Yeah. Well,
sorry to take us off into a ditch.
I think that might be a good spot to wrap up. An odd spot to wrap up, but a good one. That's always really fun. We've done a couple of these episodes where we get to just chat with each other, and hopefully our listeners find it interesting and entertaining as well. But it's always great to catch up with you guys and hear what you're seeing, and get a chance to talk about it. So I appreciate everyone being here. And because we've all been on the podcast before, and you probably know something about what we like to do when we're not working. We're going to change our question at the end of the show and look ahead to the summer and ask about, I'd like to know if you have a vacation planned or if there's something in particular that you're looking forward to this summer. So maybe we'll start with Tom.
Yeah, so trying to get away for a couple days and head up into New York around the Finger Lake region and just recreate up there, do some hiking, and of course visit the winery. So just a chance to kind of unwind and relax with the family.
Nice. Sounds really nice. What about you, Sandy?
I am going to a music festival over Labor Day weekend in Ohio. There's a band out of Cincinnati called Over the Rhine that I'm a huge fan of.
I know them.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. They're wonderful, and they have this Nowhere Else festival. So I bought passes to go to the festival, and then, we'll probably go visit Spring Grove Cemetery, which is an amazing arboretum. Michael Durr talks about it a lot in his Manual of Woody Landscape Plants. Maybe head down into Kentucky and just have a nice little vacation.
Nice. That sounds wonderful. How about you, Tim?
Nothing on the calendar right now. I'll probably go up and visit my mom, some in McKean County. It's very peaceful. I spend a lot of time in the woods, fishing and things like that. And I've been to the Finger Lakes only one time, but like around Ithaca and stuff, and that it's unbelievable how beautiful it is.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the country. And I want to just say New York State. It's just amazing. And my son's got an internship up in northwestern Connecticut, so I'm maybe try to cook up something when I go up to like visit him or something and spend some time up there.
Nice.
How about you, Margaret? What do you got on the book?
Yeah, I have a couple weddings that are taking us out west, and we have 2 sets of friends getting married, and they are getting married one day apart from each other. And so we have a wedding on a Friday night in Seattle and a wedding in San Diego on Saturday.
That's
Well,
not
at least
drivable.
at least you'll be on the right side of the country.
Yeah.
I know. There will be a very early morning flight involved, and then my brother lives in Los Angeles, so we're going to try to fold in a visit to him as well, but that's in August, so it'll be nice and hot and very celebratory. We're really looking forward to it. So
You're gonna have to pace yourself at that first reception, though.
I know. Oh my goodness. Wow. I have to keep in mind. Well, one of our friends said, you just got to stay up all night and just go to the airport directly.
That's right.
So we might try to do that. We'll see how the night goes. But yeah, some really nice things to look forward to. Seems we're visiting lots of different parts of the country, so that's great. All right. Well, thanks, guys. This was really fun, and we will see you again next time.
Nice to see all of you.
Good
Thanks,
to see
Margaret.
everybody. Thank you,
All right.
Margaret.
Take care.